The purpose of this gathering is twofold. Number one is to bring today's ICBM community together for really an unprecedented professional development experience because they'll be sitting alongside their contractor partners and some of the pioneers from the first 50 years of ICBMs and really have a chance to look at how we did things in the past, how we're doing things today, and what the future will hold for us. The second portion is to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the first ICBM going on alert, which was in October of 1959 at Vandenberg Air Force Base. So we're trying not only to educate and develop our current cadre, but we're trying to have a little bit of a commemoration and a celebration of where we've been and what the future holds for us. We're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do a field day activity where it is a wing type competition where they get to go outside and enjoy the beautiful fall weather here in Cheyenne and have a little friendly competition and get some exercise. Session 1 of the symposium is titled History of ICBMs, and that will be an opportunity to talk with some of the folks who helped develop or first operate our 4 ICBM systems of Atlas, Titan, Peacekeeper, and Minuteman. Just as we start the morning of our symposium with the past, we finish up session 4 in the afternoon with a present and future symposium. Our third and final day of the symposium starts with a memorial service. Certainly with 50 years of ICBM operations, we have had teammates from the past who have passed on, and we want to take a moment to reflect on their contributions to the ICBM force, the peace that they brought the world, and the eternal peace that they're enjoying now. And then the final event that we're going to do Friday morning is with Secretary Donnelly and General Kehler and Captain Warren Neary, who is a Air Force Reserve captain here at Headquarters 20th Air Force. And he painted a commemorative painting to encapsulate our first 50 years called America's Strategic Backstop, 50 Years Strong. And we are donating that original painting to the Air Force Art Program, and that painting will be on permanent display in the office of the Secretary of the Air Force. So again, a great honor to have Secretary Donnelly accept that piece of artwork and proudly display it in his office area. We really think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. I mean, I am not aware of any other time when we have brought so many leaders from the past and the present of ICBMs together. And I think for those who can be a part of it, it's such an honor for them to be there, and those who can't be a part of it, we hope to send these folks back to their bases and spread the word, tell them all the great things that they heard, and just share the experience with them. But we're excited for a memorable week and just looking forward to the opportunity to be together.
Welcome to F.E. Warren Air Force Base and the celebration and commemoration of 50 years of ICBM alert duty. It's my great pleasure to be your deputy host, and that means that I get to introduce people real quickly here. I have a very long and flowery introduction for your host, and I'm not going to read it. What's important this morning is that in 1975, Second Lieutenant Bob Kehler qualified as a Minuteman launch officer and was assigned to Malmstrom Air Force Base. Today, he's the commander of Air Force Space Command, and he is our host. Ladies and gentlemen, General Bob Kehler.
Well, I am really excited about what we're going to hear today. All the speakers that we have, this really is a great reunion of a sort. It's also a great opportunity for us to put our heads together for a couple of days, not only remember why we are where we are, but who we are, and I think that that's equally important. We are in the middle of a transition of the ICBM force, and after almost 17 years of stewardship in Air Force Space Command, we will transition the ICBM force to Global Strike Command in December. And so that is an interesting challenge for all of us, and I will remind everybody in the room that our commitment remains perfection of a standard of perfection as we make that transition come true. We're going to hear some wonderful perspectives from some truly amazing flag officers, and both active and retired. And I will tell you up front, for those of you who are in the retired ranks, you are the giants that we are standing on the shoulders of, and we thank you for that. We've got a lot of our senior enlisted leadership here, both current and former senior enlisted leaders. The backbone of our Air Force, certainly the backbone of the Missile Force, and we would not be who we are today without our enlisted and without our enlisted leaders. So I'm going to be interested in hearing their perspectives also as we go forward. Just as a reminder, for 50 years, an awful lot of people have been part of this mission. The reality of 50 years of alert duty is involved with the people, and they are represented in this room today. The numbers who have come through the missile business in 50 years are huge. So you're going to meet a lot of the folks during this symposium that have shaped this force into the force that it is today. We gather not to just commemorate the 50 years of vigilance, but also 50 years of camaraderie. Because, as all of you know, the closest friends that we have in our active duty life and then beyond for many is that bond of camaraderie that has formed in these missile units. Congress of the United States and the President of the United States assigned responsibility for this mission to the United States Air Force over 50 years ago. And what a remarkable achievement that we have had. So, we're going to celebrate this accomplishment together. We're going to remember all those who have served. We're also going to remember those who are serving at this very moment. And let's not forget those that are going to serve, because our responsibility is to hand over a force to the next generation that is better than the one that we were given when we took over. And that's the same legacy that we have had across our Air Force for all of these years, and it's our responsibility. Thanks for joining us. For 50 years, the ICBM Alert Force has been the force that never sleeps and never takes a day off. That's the legacy that we have. That's the responsibility that we have. That's the tradition of honor and the legacy of valor that we have to uphold as American airmen. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to the day. Let's get started. Thank you.
Panel 1 is entitled The History of ICBMs.
A little bit of story of the Atlas. I'm going to cover 5 topics. One, the General Schriever and his skeleton crew for the first 3 years as a brigadier general. He had 4 colonels, less than that originally, for 3 years. 2, his first 2 budgets were turned down by poor man Secretary Quarles. 3, Secretary Quarles was strongly opposed to the selection of Camp Cook, now Vandenberg Air Force Base. 4, why we had 3 above-ground squadrons. And 5, the pseudo capability declared by General Powers in October of 1959. As you all know, Western Development Division was established in 1 July 1954. Brigadier General Bernard A. Schriever, with 13 people, started in an old schoolhouse, and I arrived on 1 August 1955, and at that time everything had been R&D, and also it was a fight for money because General LeMay was opposed. All he wanted is more bombers and bigger and better nuclear bombs. And they started the initial operational capability, and my job was to design the first operational base. And General Power at that time was a 3-star general and had been ahead of and commanded ARDC, but he'd been ahead of a party that attended the May Day celebration of the Russians and had come back and given a not too optimistic report to the Congress about the status of the Russians' missile. And so when Secretary Ferry was testifying, the Congress had offered him $1 billion. And he said, I couldn't spend it if you gave it to me. So when General Schriever asked for $894 million, he didn't have it. And this time General Twining got involved and said, Mr. Secretary, if you insist on turning this down, then I ask that you go with me to President Eisenhower and say why. And Quarles said, why, General? And General Twining said, I have on my desk a letter from the President saying that the missile program is #1 priority. And I do not want to be the one to say to the President, I don't have the money since you are controlling it.
Good morning. I don't have the luxury of experience back beyond 1960. In 1960, I was assigned to Lincoln, Nebraska as a deputy crew commander of a Atlas F missile crew, and Vernon here was the SATAF commander at the time when I was there, my first missile assignment. But some of the salient historical facts precede me, so I will briefly summarize some of those. Leading the Western Development Division was Bernard Schriever, General Schriever, who became the guiding light and the main force behind the concurrent development of Titan and Thor and Atlas and Jupiter and Minuteman. All of those systems he pushed through while either at Western Development Division or at Systems Command or headquarters. In 1955, the United States decided to deploy both the Atlas and the Titan by 1962. The Atlas would be first. And the Titan was first considered as insurance in case the Atlas failed. But subsequently it became a separate development and a follow-on to the Atlas. The first test launch with a dummy second stage was in February 1959. That was followed by, this is a Titan. That was followed by several explosions on the pad, and then the successful two-stage flight in 1960. So the first Titan R&D missile had been fabricated and accepted by the Air Force in 1958. The USAF was given operational control of ICBMs in 1955.
I'm here to talk about the Minuteman. It was the unexpected and unforeseen product of two Air Force officers, Major General Bernard Schriever and Colonel Edward N. Hale. Schriever was the facilitator. Hale was the creator. Without either one of them, there would not have been a Minuteman. When Hale started working on the concept of the solid ICBM, he would try out his ideas on the rest of it. We would listen to him politely, I hope, and because we were concerned with our own problems. He first talked about digging holes in the backyards of reliable people like retired military people and putting the missiles there. So the missile became like the musket over the fireplace in the old times. That's how Minuteman got started. Now, he also told us that he was going to do a hot launch with this missile. It was necessary. Remember, he's trying to keep the costs down. He didn't want to have elevators or anything else like that. One of us mentioned diversionary tubes, or elevators. And he nixed the suggestion. Dollars were the important thing. When asked why he thought he could do a hot launch without an elevator or anything else, he said, it's a simple matter of choosing the right diameter. And we went, what do you mean? He said, okay, the missile, the silo's 70 feet deep. Let's have a diameter of a half a mile. And you visualize that, yeah, of course. Well, how about a quarter of a mile? Yeah, 1,200 feet, yeah. Let's say it's just a question of the right diameter.
It's a real pleasure for me to talk about the Peacekeeper program this morning. And to focus the discussion, I decided to talk about key decisions that had a significant effect on the weapon system that we finally fielded. In the mid-'70s, of course, everybody was looking at the threat data. The Soviets were putting the SS-18 and SS-19s in hard silos, and SAC had written a tough requirement for a new missile. We had this wonderful one that Joe just described, and through its phases of Minuteman 1, 2, and 3, SAC wrote this requirement that they needed a counterforce weapon, and besides that, it had to be survivable, and besides that, it had to retain all the reliability and ease of operation of the Minuteman. In the Carter administration, President Carter really didn't want to build another missile, and so we got a kind of a stiff arm from, he had Secretary Perry, and there was one guy up there, Zyberg, who worked in our business before we went up there, and he was pushing hard to get us into full-scale development. But the president really wasn't for it until finally the Russians invaded Afghanistan, and that changed the world.
It is such a great honor to be here, and a great honor for me to be able to associate myself with this panel of distinguished leaders. And with that, I'd like to turn the stage over to General Welch.
The first issue was the influential personalities in the Cold War that formed our strategic visions and that actually had a great deal to do with forming our strategic forces. The first one might surprise you as President Harry F. Truman. And the reason for that is the tough decisions that he made to halt Soviet expansion into Southern Europe, into Turkey and Greece, and his decision to deal with North Korean aggression moved the strategy of containment from a concept to an actual practice. And he set the tone for the next 40 years. The second one will not surprise you is General Curtis LeMay. The point was General LeMay was probably the most influential person in the Air Force, out of the Air Force, in terms of people programs when I was vice chief and when I was chief. Said our strategic forces are the most professional, dedicated, committed, focused military force in the history of the world.
I like warriors, and I'm glad to be in a room full of warriors, and I'm proud of each and every one of you. What I want to do today is approach this subject from a personal point of view, and my background with the missile force, and I want to do it in chronological order. I came into the Air Force in 1956. In 1962, after a 4-year assignment in Europe, I was assigned to Cannon Air Force Base, flying F-100s. That fall, I had my first exposure to missiles when we deployed to MacDill Air Force Base to participate in the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was to lead a flight of 4 F-100s to blow up a Soviet missile site. At the time, as you know, SAC had Atlas missiles on alert here at F.E. Warren, and 10 brand new Minuteman missiles in silos here at Welch. And I believe that it was the SAC missile force, its bombers, tankers, and recce aircraft that had the major impact on resolving that crisis.
There's a couple heroes that I'd like to talk about. I know General Schriever, I know Joni James, having a chance to visit with General Schriever as the Vice Commander of Air Force Space Command and spend some time with him, and seeing him in his last days alive in their house in Washington, D.C., and him telling me that you've got to remain committed and make sure that people are committed to the mission, because it's so important, as General Welch and General Chain alluded to. General Schriever certainly was a leader and an inspiration to all of us. But I would add to that list a couple other names, traditional names, if you will. One is Herman Kahn, and who wrote On Thermonuclear War, which is kind of a take on war. Clausewitz's book, but really starting asking questions about, you know, there may be something more to this nuclear business than the doomsday scenario. And as a futurist back then, Herman Kahn only lived for 61 years, but I think he created a set of questions and dialogue that really stimulated the business. And he was part of a group that has been connected with the United States Air Force since its inception, and that's the RAND Corporation in Santa Monica, California. And he and one of my bosses, Andy Marshall, and still serving in the Office of Net Assessment in the Pentagon, and Dr. Schlesinger at RAND, as well as Henry Rowan and others in that organization. The whole Air Force experience is intertwined with the futurists who looked at those kinds of questions in those days and set the course for the future.
We have a great panel here today, and if you look at them, what you're going to find out is they've all worked together often, worked with each other often, and trust each other through and through.
Our objective this afternoon, as I understand it, is to reflect on extraordinary people who have contributed to the ICBM force over the past 50 years. And the matter of fact, I think is fairly obvious, and that is that the room is filled with them. We're here, I believe, to recognize not just an event on the calendar, and that is achieving 50 years of strategic deterrence with the ICBM force, but rather to recognize the people of the force, and a force that I believe over the period of 50 years and today is in many respects an elite force. The men and women of the force, you in the room, you are assigned a critical mission, and it is clearly of national importance. The people of this force, especially those who control access or have access to our nuclear weapons, hold an extraordinary level of responsibility, and with that comes a level of accountability that is perhaps unique in the United States Air Force, at least in the nuclear community. The force is elite not so much because of its extraordinary people, and many of them have been mentioned, but I think so more the case because of the extraordinary contributions of ordinary people over that period of time.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit now about our splendid enlisted force. And obviously it's a much different era today than it was in the 70s and 80s. The nuclear mission was preeminent then. We all know that. You could, all kinds of articles in the paper about it, debates, decisions. But it's very different now. Different set of world players on the stage, a different set of challenges in national security. Back then we had a large number of highly qualified nuclear officers and enlisted, and today it's a struggle to find nuclear expertise. And so it's a very different time. But the tremendous leadership exerted by our senior NCOs in training, mentoring, leading by example of our young enlisted, we've all dealt with teenagers and early 20s young folks. Just think about how skilled and persistent our senior, mid-level, and senior NCO Corps is in getting through to and making an unbeatable team out of this set of young men and women. My hat is eternally off to them for doing that, and they continue to do it today. Always amazed and proud of the work ethic and resiliency of our enlisted force, regardless of the conditions, regardless of the danger. They always have a put-me-in, coach attitude, whether it's below zero weather, long shifts away from the base, guarding a nuclear facility in the middle of Montana, North Dakota, or Wyoming, along a 150-mile long flight line, which makes for all kinds of difficulties. And their superb training always showed through to me. I was always impressed with that. And they knew the basics. They knew the safety. They knew surety. They knew security. And they were intensely proud, and still are today, of their ability to get it done right.
As I was preparing to think about whom I might list on my 50 years of extraordinary people in the ICBM business, a couple things came to mind as I was going over some thoughts over the last couple weeks. The first was, as both General Neary and General McMahon mentioned, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of people that we could all mention. And thinking back when I was a young crew member or at SAC, at the 4315th, you know, as they say, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting 6 or 8 extraordinary people in the missile business because they were everywhere. The 3901st, the 4315th, Headquarters SAC, numbered air forces, air divisions, the Pentagon. Just an extraordinary number of people in the business over the years that had an influence. The second thing that came to mind when I was thinking of the extraordinary people, thinking back to some of my early days and some of the leaders that I knew, they weren't missileers. My squadron commander, my wing commander back then were mainly SAC officers, lieutenant colonels, colonels from the bomber force, B-47s, B-52 folks. In many cases, they were navigators. Today, and certainly not that many years ago, the leadership at the squadron level grew up in the missile business, and that was not the case way back in the dark ages when I started Minuteman I. The third thing that came to mind is that many of the extraordinary people that influenced me in the missile business were not missileers. They were people from other career fields. Maybe they were SAC, maybe they were civilians that had a great impact on our business. And the final thought that came to mind was, when you think about extraordinary people in the ICBM business, it's a total team effort.
Two years ago this time, virtually 2 years ago this day, it was actually Columbus Day, General Welch's Defense Science Board was meeting for the first time to begin examining our unauthorized munitions transfer from Minot Air Force Base to Barksdale. A year ago this week, I was briefing at Corona some options for reorganization. And the decision was made on October 3rd last year at Corona out at the Air Force Academy that we would stand up Global Strike Command. We began having meetings associated with that within a few weeks, and we were told by process owners that this was typically an 18 to 24-month process for us to move forward on that and to base Global Strike Command. And in this, with that kind of intense focus, Air Force General Klotz took command of the newly established Air Force Global Strike Command on the 7th of August. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone and the podium over to Lieutenant General Frank Klotz, the Commander of Air Force Global Strike Command.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to see some people stayed in the room after the announcement was made that General Chili Chilton would not be speaking. I thought there would be a mass exodus for the door, so thank you. And thank you, Don Alston, for that very generous introduction. Now, as you all know, we recently celebrated the 62nd anniversary of the Air Force, and of course, this event, which marks the 50th anniversary of ICBMs on alert. So it's fitting that we use this occasion to reflect upon our heritage, and the panels that we had this morning couldn't be a better way to have done that. As you wander the halls of any Air Force building, you'll see that the walls are adorned with pictures of airplanes and missiles and satellites. Or as you drive around any base or visit any one of our many museums, you'll see magnificent displays that remind us of our heritage. Now, the Air Force has been, is now, and always will be a service that operates at the leading edge of technology, harnessing the latest advances in science and engineering to fly, fight, and win in air, space, and cyberspace. But to an outside observer, it might seem as though we've dedicated this event, this week, the 62nd anniversary of the Air Force, to paying homage to a piece of hardware, in this case to the intercontinental ballistic missile. But our heritage really involves much more than the special machines that we operate, maintain, secure, and support. Rather, as our Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary Donnelly, who will be here tonight, and our Chief of Staff recently wrote in a letter to all airmen, they said the heart and soul of our Air Force is found in our airmen and in their families. So in recognition of our golden anniversary celebration this week, it's important to remember it's the airmen behind the hardware, behind the ICBM, that we really pay our respects to. So since that first ICBM went on alert in 1959, our airmen have played an indispensable role in securing our nation. The steadfastness of these airmen has been evident through 18,241 days of continuous alert. And it was the firm resolve of these airmen that helped set the conditions that ultimately enabled the United States and its allies to prevail in the Cold War. And the story continues today. Every day our airmen write new chapters in our collective history. And one new chapter began at Barksdale Air Force Base with the formal activation of the Air Force's newest major command, Global Strike Command, on the 7th of August. I think it's a testament to the importance of the nuclear deterrence and global strike missions that we now have a major command, again, focused solely on this enterprise. an enterprise that is a key element of the larger set of capabilities that the Air Force provides to the joint team and to the nation. But as important as those other defense priorities may be, there is none more important than our special trust and responsibility for nuclear weapons. For if there is one unchanging truth about this awesome capability, it is that it demands our constant and undivided attention. This is true on the day in which that first ICBM went on alert. It's true now, and it will be true in the future, regardless of the size and composition of the nuclear deterrence and global strike force. Now, earlier this year at a speech in Prague, President Obama made this point perfectly clear. Make no mistake, he said, as long as these weapons exist, the United States will maintain a safe, secure, and effective arsenal to deter any adversary and guarantee that defense to our allies. So this then is the fundamental mission of Air Force Global Strike Command, to provide safe, secure, and effective forces for nuclear deterrence and global strike operations in support of our combatant commanders and of our Commander-in-Chief. Thank you very much, General Kehler and General Burg, for inviting me and the other members who are here of Air Force Global Strike Command staff to be a part of this most auspicious event. It's been both an honor and a privilege, sir, to be with you and to continue to serve beside so many friends, colleagues, and kindred spirits. And so happy 50th and best wishes for many, many more years to come. Thanks.
Well, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. You know, I must say, I know I didn't ask any questions earlier either, but I have to say, I think you let the prior folks off. I don't know. You let the young guys go a little bit. I don't think you really took them to task. So now, you know, I've got one of my former commanders up here, General Kehler, another one of my former commanders here. I just want to say, hey, open season. Let's take advantage of this opportunity, and I can be counseled later. General Casey, General Kehler, please join us up here. General Casey, please. So, a microphone up front.
Thank you very much. Al Casey, retired. I listened to the whole story about the Global Strike Command, but I didn't hear anything about what is one of my concerns about another lost patrol, which is the acquisition business for any new future ICBM or related activity, and how that relates to the new command.
I would offer today that none of these weapon systems survives without acquisition and sustainment. And so for the sustainment piece, General Casey, we've already made the decision that Air Force Materiel Command and the ICBM Program Office have gone to be part of the Air Force's Nuclear Weapons Center. So ICBM sustainment is now being managed out of Materiel Command from the Nuclear Weapons Center. The question about future ICBMs remains to be determined. As you know, when we stood down the Ballistic Missile Office that you used to head, we took the remaining pieces of that and we sent them to the Space and Missile Systems Center over in Los Angeles. That nucleus of future ICBM acquirers remains there. But the question is, for a follow-on system, is that the right place for them? And that is still to be determined. What we know is that the sustainment of Minuteman needs to be managed under the normal weapon system sustainment processes for the Air Force. And that piece has been done, those pieces have been put in place. Now the question is, what do we do for a follow-on system? And we've just really started the studies for that follow-on system today. I don't mean today, but within the last 6 months or so. So it remains to be seen when we begin to shape the follow-on system where a program office would be stood up. We don't have a ballistic missile office anymore. The vestiges of that are at SMC, but there's not much there at SMC. There's some future work going on for guidance. There's some future work going on for propulsion. There's some stuff going on at the Air Force Research Lab, but not much, and it's not a coherent program. we've got some decisions to make as we look to the future.
Folks, I got a little history lesson for you here. 20th Air Force, let's see, who's commanding 20th Air Force today? General Burg's 20th Air Force was activated on the 4th of April, on the 4th month, that would be 4 April 1944, during World War II, and served as a heavy strategic bombardment organization. Serving in the Pacific Theater, its B-29s carried the air war to the Japanese. Following the war, 20th Air Force remained in the Pacific, and it was eventually deactivated in 1955. But it came bouncing right back with its reactivation on the 1st of September 1991, and was assigned responsibility for the nation's land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles. During the past 18 years, 20th Air Force has been a linchpin of the nation's strategic nuclear deterrence, on alert, of course, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you to rise and join me in a toast. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose a toast. Here's to the 20th Air Force, its World War II legacy, and its current ICBM mission, cornerstone of the free world's peace and security. To the ICBM Force. That includes Minot.
Well, thanks. What a day. We're honored to have the 22nd Secretary of the Air Force, the Honorable Michael B. Donnelly, as our guest speaker tonight. In 1972, Secretary Donnelly began serving the nation as a member of the 18th Airborne Corps and the 5th Special Forces Group Airborne. He has over 30 years of experience in national security matters, which is why, in June of 2008, he was selected by Secretary of Defense Robert Gates for his current position. Secretary Gates made the recommendation to the President, stating, "The new Air Force leadership team has the qualifications, skill, and commitment to excellence necessary to guide the Air Force through this transition and beyond." Secretary Donnelly received the charge to revitalize the Air Force's nuclear enterprise, and his decisive leadership enabled the service to establish a clear path to restoring our credibility. Under his leadership, the Air Force made a commitment to renew the nuclear enterprise. While we've made great progress, there is still much work to be done, and the Secretary is committed to providing the leadership required for us to be successful. It's a pleasure to serve under such a fine leader, and I'm pleased he could join us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of the Air Force, the Honorable Michael B. Donnelly.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you all for your commitment to this vital mission, for including me in this evening's event. I've been looking forward to this for several months now. And I do want to express the Secretary of Defense's regrets that he could not join us here tonight as well. When I came out to Cheyenne a couple of months ago for Frontier Days, I had just gotten word that the Secretary had accepted the invitation to be here tonight, and he was very much looking forward to this. As you probably can appreciate, the business of Afghanistan has kept him in Washington and has changed his schedule pretty radically in the last week or so. So he is working with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the National Security Council on a very accelerated and deep schedule over the next couple of weeks to work through those very important issues for our nation. But it is a pleasure to be back representing him and representing other parts of our Air Force tonight to celebrate this remarkable occasion with you. I am indeed humbled to be here. When I first came to Washington over 30 years ago and had a chance to work on the staff of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I sat in hearing rooms and listened to General Jack Jane, to General Larry Welch, and occasionally to General Lord, who was not far behind, General Jameson, others here tonight, as they briefed the Senate Armed Services Committee on the importance of this mission in its various forms. Peacekeeper, Minuteman, survivability, lots of bomber issues, all kinds of nuclear triad issues, which were front and center on the nation's agenda during those critical years. And as we sat down before dinner to have a photograph taken, I turned to General Chilton and I said, in all honesty and humility, what am I doing in this chair with these icons of our Air Force and of our nuclear mission? It is indeed, gentlemen, an honor to be with you tonight. It is a great reunion for Missileers tonight, and we have generations represented from the past, I think just about every decade of service of the ICBM force here tonight. So it is indeed a very, very special occasion. Also wanted to thank the community leaders that have joined us tonight, not just from Cheyenne, but from elsewhere, from Minot, from Vandenberg, from Malmstrom. This is indeed a reunion for our entire Missileer community, and we are grateful for the community support that is provided at each of those bases for this very, very vital mission. So thank you to the community leaders here for all you do to support our airmen in this important work. You know, as I was getting ready to come up tonight, I was thinking about, and this has been a lovely evening, General Burg, General Kehler, but I was thinking about an experience that happened to a 19th century British statesman, Joseph Chamberlain, who was actually the father of Neville Chamberlain, who was a notable prime minister of Britain. And one night, Chamberlain was the guest of honor at a dinner in an important city, and the mayor was presiding over the dinner. And when coffee was being served, the mayor leaned over and whispered in Mr. Chamberlain's ear, saying, shall we let the people enjoy themselves a little longer, or had we better have your speech now? So I don't want to put a damper on the evening because I think it's just getting started, but I'll be watching for signs to the contrary as my speech progresses tonight. But it is an honor to be with you, and fitting that we should celebrate this anniversary with the men and women who've provided top cover for our national security for the last half century and continue to do so today. And as we celebrate 50 years of unquestioned ICBM readiness, it's important to acknowledge this rich history, as you've been doing today and this evening. During this time, there is no doubt that the ICBM has revolutionized national policy and military strategy and changed the organization and shape of the United States Air Force from its earliest beginnings. This transformation of policy and strategy really began in the late 40s, a period when the strategic environment, new technologies, and substantial resource changes all combined to alter the new Air Force's direction. The post-World War II strategic environment, you may recall, was itself characterized by rapid change. We were initially the world's sole nuclear power, but the Soviet test of an atomic weapon in 1949 and the subsequent war in Korea swiftly heightened an already tense Cold War. And throughout the 50s, the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union played out across the globe. These considerable strategic shifts were also accompanied by significant technological change and challenge. The early missiles of the day failed to qualify as true ICBMs due to their inadequate range and payload. In fact, they couldn't even exit and re-enter the atmosphere. These missiles also lacked precision. The nuclear weapons of the late 40s were so heavy and of such low yield that mating them to inaccurate missiles gave them only marginal utility. However, the march toward a foundational strategic deterrent had begun, and the development of hydrogen fusion weapons greatly decreased weapon size and weight, enabling effective ICBMs to become a reality. But as these needed technological breakthroughs were being made, substantial resource challenges also hampered ICBM development. The Air Force actually canceled its modest ballistic missile program in 1947 due to post-World War II budgetary constraints. And these challenges continued during the Eisenhower administration's New Look defense strategy, which shifted resources from conventional capabilities into air-based nuclear deterrent capabilities. The strategy also trimmed ICBM development budgets and was commonly known as the poor man's approach in the Air Force. It's all relative. These lean years lasted until 1957, when the Soviets launched Sputnik, a defining moment for an entire generation of Americans, some of whom had been previously convinced of our unending dominance in military affairs. These three factors, the changes in the strategic environment, technology, and resources, converged in the mid-50s with the formation of something called the Teapot Committee. This committee was led by Trevor Gardner, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Research and Development, who noted that the United States was behind the Soviets in the race to field ICBMs and called for a maximum effort to field our missiles first, as there was no time to waste in developing the cornerstone of our nation's strategic deterrent. While Gardner's committee provided much of the impetus, fielding our early ICBM fleet wouldn't have been possible without the inspired leadership of General Bernard Schriever. Among many Air Force leaders responsible for this magnificent feat, his vision and leadership stand out. One of General Schriever's key contributions was the application of concurrent or parallel development, an acquisition strategy that is still considered an innovative approach. When General Schriever took charge of ICBM development, he quickly realized that existing procurement methods would delay the program, and as a result, he made two major changes. First, he issued contracts to multiple contractors for each major missile component for parallel development of the same parts. The competition enhanced both the performance of the components and the speed of development because each company desired to be selected for the final production contract. Second, he assured that while the missiles were being developed, all other work proceeded simultaneously to include site construction, flight testing, crew training, all with the goal of ensuring that the missiles, sites, equipment, infrastructure, and crews would be ready for operations at the same time. While the concurrent approach was much faster than the standard approach, it was also more expensive. The cost of fielding our first generation ICBMs was over $150 billion in today's dollars, greatly exceeding the cost and magnitude of the World War II Manhattan Project itself. The technological innovations of Benny Schriever and his team greatly accelerated the deployment of the first ICBMs. These missiles had been developed in just over 5 years, beating all estimates and comparable timelines for less complex systems like the B-52, which took over 9 years to develop. At least one other leader foresaw this kind of effort in the 1950s. A short time after World War II, General Hap Arnold noted that the First World War had been won by brawn, the second by logistics, and the next war would be won by brains. And it turns out that General Schriever made him prophetic. Born of General Schriever's remarkable development effort, our ICBM fleet has served as the backbone of America's nuclear deterrence for 50 years. This deterrence is at work every minute of every day, providing us and our allies an umbrella of protection and a strong backdrop for diplomatic engagement. But this deterrence wouldn't have been effective without the selfless sacrifice and the commitment of our men and women and the families supporting them, who've executed the mission on a daily basis as a team. We depended on the maintenance personnel who ensure the missiles and the alert facilities are ready when needed. We've depended on the security force personnel to ensure the missile sites and the weapons are secure. We've depended on the missile alert facility support personnel to ensure the crews and their security teams are well fed. Finally, we've depended on the operators to man these alerts and to ensure that when called upon, they are ready to execute. And as we gather tonight, as General Klotz noted in his toast, over 750 men and women proudly team to ensure that 450 combat-ready ICBMs are ready if needed. The spirit of this teamwork has carried this mission throughout the last half-century to include the heights of the Cold War. At least 5 crises during that period raised for consideration the potential use of nuclear weapons. During that time, there is no doubt that our men and women, standing shoulder to shoulder, sitting in missile silos, working with our NATO allies, maintained peace and security during one of the most dangerous periods in human history. Tonight, it's fitting that we honor their dedication and selfless sacrifice. Looking ahead, several high-level reviews and negotiations are underway that will shape our future. When finished, the Nuclear Posture Review and the Quadrennial Defense Review may drive changes in how America's nuclear forces are structured. A START follow-on agreement, if and when completed, would also inform our actions going forward. But as we monitor these issues, the concept of nuclear deterrence, supported by a triad of land, air, and sea-based capabilities, and now bolstered by modest missile defenses, remain fundamental pillars of America's national security strategy. As part of our commitment to this mission, on December 1st, we'll take a vital and landmark step in our nuclear roadmap by transitioning the ICBM fleet from Air Force Space Command to the recently formed Air Force Global Strike Command. AFSPC has effectively sustained this mission, but this changeover will establish clearer lines of authority and will continue to strengthen advocacy for this mission. What changes is the administrative chain of command, and the command we assign this mission to within the United States Air Force. What remains the same is the safe, secure, and effective operation of this weapon system in support of U.S. Strategic Command. The days of SAC have indeed passed. While we have not created it, we have, with Global Strike Command, brought forward its culture to include an expectation of perfection in every step of this mission. We recognize that we cannot fail in this work and will continue to be good stewards of our portion of America's nuclear deterrent forces. So as we celebrate tonight, let's pause to reflect on our progress over this last half-century. The legacy of our ICBM fleet and its missileers is a proud one. It's a story of men of genius and innovation like Trevor Gardner and Benny Schriever, It's a story of persevering despite significant technical and financial challenges. It's a story of the service of successive generations of airmen who spent their careers sustaining and operating these systems and their alert facilities. But above all, it is a story of nuclear deterrence, of peace, and of security. We have much to be proud of tonight, and we should celebrate. But our work is not done. Nuclear weapons are likely to be present in a dangerous world for the foreseeable future, and so the mission will continue. As long as our nation requires this capability, the men and women of the 20th Air Force Global Strike Command will be here to provide it with dedication and focus, with precision and reliability. Thank you for marking this rich legacy of service tonight and for your continuing commitment to this vital mission. As ever, it remains a great honor for me to serve with you in the world's finest Air Force. Thank you.
During the Cold War, the United States depended on a triad of nuclear systems to defend the nation in a concept known as strategic deterrence. By the late 1980s, however, the cost of the Cold War and the internal problems in the Russian communist system were taking a toll on the Soviet Union. By 1989, the Soviet Union was on the brink of collapse and deprived of Soviet military support. The communist leaders of the Warsaw Pact states were losing power. The end of the Cold War is often dated to the fall of the wall separating East and West Berlin in November of 1989. When the East German government, after weeks of unrest, agreed that all East German citizens could visit West Germany and West Berlin, the Soviet Union finally collapsed in 1991. And I propose a toast to the men and women who operated, maintained, and supported the strategic nuclear force that formed the cornerstone of Americans' deterrence and won the Cold War. To the victors of the Cold War.
We are gathered here this morning to celebrate, to remember, and honor those who have given and spent their lives in the development and sustainment of our national strategic backbone, the ICBM. It is through their dedication and hard work that has provided for our heritage and our national defense, and whom we remember today.
I came in the Air Force not too long after that. Spent a couple of years in aircraft maintenance, and then realized there are better things in the Air Force than that for me. There was a new field called ICBMs, and I volunteered in 1961 and spent the next 28 years in our missile business. We were different, as I said. Our Air Force didn't face the dangers that the people in Korea or World War II faced. Our front line wasn't in some foreign country. Our front lines were under the plains of North Dakota or Kansas or New Mexico or Texas. Our enemy was far away, but he was still close at the same time. We didn't face some of the dangers that the troops faced on the front lines in foreign countries, but we did face lots of dangers. We operated and still operate very complex, very demanding systems. We have nuclear weapons, we have high explosives, we have hazardous gases and liquids. We have all sorts of falling hazards, lots of ways to hurt oneself or kill oneself. But amazingly, throughout the last 50 years, we've done very little of that. We've had very few fatalities in our business. There have been some. We've been very safe in our operations. We emphasize the fact that we need to be very safe in everything we do, and we've done it very, very well. But saying that, we have lost some of our missileers, both on active duty and many later on. I'd like to recognize some of those today. Start off, number one, we had an Atlas crew back in 1963 flying to Alert in a U-6A airplane, a single-engine airplane. We used to travel that way to Alert. They crashed on landing on a gravel road in Nebraska and killed the entire crew. We're placing a memorial to that crew on that gravel road pretty soon near Lincoln to memorialize their deaths. In 1965, 53 contract workers were working in a silo outside Little Rock, Arkansas, when a fire occurred, and all 53 died. They could not escape. In 1968, Master Sergeant Gene Buggy, a maintenance technician at Little Rock, fell in the silo and was killed. In 1976, Sergeant Larry South, a maintenance technician at Little Rock, was killed in another accident. In 1978, Sergeant Robert Thomas and Airman Irby Epstein were killed when an oxidizer leak occurred, and they were overcome by the fumes. In 1980, Senior Airman David Livingston was killed when the Damascus silo exploded, and an enormous explosion destroyed the entire complex there. While I was at Ellsworth in the 1980s, the first female helicopter pilot in the Air Force, Lieutenant Marcia Allen, was killed when her chopper crashed during a cable check. We lost other helicopter crews and maintenance people and missile security folks in helicopter crashes at other bases. We lost members in traffic accidents driving to and from the sites. We drive millions of miles and we fly millions of miles. We lost people in those accidents. We lost a Glico maintenance NCO in Sicily when he fell out of a truck during a deployment exercise. So we've lost members of the active duty force, but not very many considering the size of our force, the complexity of our systems, and what we've done over the last 50 years. 50 years ago, a missile crew went on alert at Vandenberg, crew R01 of the 576 Missile Squadron at Site A1. Captain Rush Thresher was the commander. Captain Thresher became a colonel later in the Air Force, was a DCM. He passed away a few years ago, along with other members of his crew. Chief Master Sergeant Struckness, Tech Sergeant Christian, Master Sergeant Hartz, Tech Sergeant Pittman, and Master Sergeant Krushevitz were also members of his crew, who are no longer with us. 5 members of his crew are still alive. I talked to a couple of them last week, and they wish they could be here, but we honor them too today because of their service and that first alert 50 years ago. In 1993, the Association of Air Force Missileers was formed, and we decided that we should find some way to recognize outstanding missileers who are no longer with us. We decided the best way was to honor them with our grants to museums every year. We provide grants for missile displays to museums around the country. Over the last 16 years, we've given out about $160,000. We've honored 160 departed missileers during that period. I want to name just a few of those today. There are many more, but to give you an idea of some of your fellow missileers who are no longer with us. General Schriever, of course, is first, the father of our business. Colonel Gil Fredericks, who was the commander of wings at Minot and Grand Forks and the Minuteman train wing. When I was a young captain, he would come into pre-departure and tell us that I've been a commander my whole 30 years in the Air Force, and I'm non-rated. I'm very proud of it. A great commander. Major General Dick Bovary, who graduated from Annapolis in 1954, went to Germany. He was one of the first Matador crew members in the first pilotless bomber squadron. That's what it was called before it was a missile squadron. Major General Bob Lenhart, who was a 44th Missile Wing crew member as a young lieutenant and later commander of the Air Division at Minot. Brigadier General Chick Adams, who was a commander of the 44th Missile Wing and then commander of the Air Division at Ellsworth. Wing commanders like Colonel Julius Pickoff, the first commander at Lowry Air Force Base of the Titan Wing at Lowry. Colonel Burton Andrus, the first commander at Malmstrom of the first Minuteman Wing, commander when the wing came on alert during the Cuban crisis in 1962. And finally, distinguished non-commissioned officer leaders like Chief Master Sergeant Connie Paquette, one of our board members years ago, Chief Master Sergeant John Bodovinak, and many, many others who served over the last years. As I said, 160 total who are members of our association, and many more we recognized over the years who are no longer with us. So today I ask you to honor all of those who've served, honor those who continue to serve, but especially those who are no longer with us for their dedication and their service. Thank you.
my dad was an Air Force chaplain. And guess you have to have a dad be a chaplain to get this job today. But among the many places my father served was in 1950 he came to F.E. Warren and was a chaplain here. I was 2 years old, and when I started coming here to visit this base, my mother would say, I'd say, I'm going to F.E. Warren. She said, well, did you find the red brick house? I said, yes. You know, I don't know which one it was. This probably, I'm sure it was one of the little ones, but this is a fabulous place. And I am deeply honored, sir, that you would invite me to be a part of this ceremony. Thank you very much for this great privilege. I'd like to read one verse out of the Christian Scriptures, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. Paul writes, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Our Declaration of Independence begins with, when in the course of human events. Isn't it amazing the challenges that fall to each generation in the course of human events? Obviously, when we enter the world, we cannot see the challenges that will be ours. We just take our turn in the course of human events. We could blame the science and technology for the challenges that come if those people would just stop discovering stuff and developing things. We could all live a quiet, peaceful life without any fear of someone trying to hurt us or make life tougher. But people will always keep discovering and developing things. Obviously, we could and should blame the evil people of the world who seek to destroy life for the challenges that come to us in the course of human events. Therefore, in the course of human events, it fell to people like General Schriever and to all the others that we have heard about this week and during this symposium, General LeMay, Staff Sergeant Johnny McBride, Senior Airman Cash, and others that were mentioned yesterday, to step forward and to discover and to develop a new kind of defense that was absolutely necessary to ensure peace and security of the free world would be guaranteed. As we have heard from Colonel Simpson, there is a great legacy of men and women who were caught in a time of human events that needed a new kind of warrior. Today we honor the people who, in the words of the Apostle Paul, have fought the good fight, have finished the race, and have kept the faith. St. Paul was talking, obviously, about spiritual battles he fought against the forces of evil. His words definitely apply to this memorial service. I call this message, Another Good Fight. It's another good fight. It began in 1959. Unlike the Army, who needed soldiers to step forward in muddy boots to fight on the ground, and unlike the Marines, who needed warriors to charge up the beach, and unlike the Navy, who needed sailors to go to sea, and unlike the Air Force, who needed airmen to learn to fly and fight in the sky, in 1959, the nation needed another brave warrior who would be vigilant, courageous, and willing to be responsible for the most powerful weapons on the planet. These warriors are the missile crews, the maintainers, the security forces, the chefs, the logisticians, the strategic planners. They were all another kind of warrior. Only those of you who've worn that pocket rocket know the enormous sacrifices by this new kind of warrior. My younger brother was a missileer here at F.E. Warren in the early 70s. The sad part about his story is he left the missile field and became a JAG. Now we got a lawyer in the family. But he knows, like most of you, the intense training required, the discipline of a checklist, the trust of a crew member, and the responsibility to obey orders. Probably more than any other fighters the nation sends into battle, the missileers understand the consequences of his or her willingness to do the mission when, in the course of human events, that would be required. We ask the question all the time of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen, and civilians who go to Iraq and Afghanistan, where do we find these people? Well, it is equally important to ask the same question of the missileers. Where did we and where do we find these people? And for 50 years now, they have become another kind of warrior who has paid the price to keep our nation safe and free. It is another good fight. It's another good fight. It's a good fight. Any sane person would believe that this is a fight we hope we never have to do. It must have been a heavy burden on the senior leaders in the 50s to develop a national military strategy called mutually assured destruction. The Cold War was a terrifying war to the warriors who served in the missile silos across the country. But it was not just terrifying, it was good. It was good because of the discipline of the crews. It was good because of the expertise of the maintainers. It was good because of the diligence of the security forces. It was good because of the strategic planning of the staff. It was good because it accomplished its primary mission. The words of General Welch yesterday, performing its primary combat mission every second of every day. This was a good fight. I have never had a problem as a Christian who believes in God and in following His way of love and peace with the need for strength and protection. These are good things. Without the strength at every echelon of society, the evil forces inflict pain. It is one of those in the course of human events necessities. These courageous warriors who established this shield of defense were good soldiers. They loved God, they loved their families, they loved living as free people. They accepted a responsibility that only a good person should have, and they did it well. And we honor them today. It is another good fight. The fight of a missileer is real. One could argue just getting to the battlefield is an extreme fight and challenge in the missile wings across our nation. Driving on those rocky roads for hours every day and flying helicopters to remote sites have taken their toll on the lives lost in this battle. The long hours of standing the watch and riding around the perimeter have kept the security forces challenged. The philosophers would say the best fight is the one that never happens. Perhaps that's one of the greatest testimonies of this memorial service. An international catastrophe has never happened. Thanks be to God and thanks be to the missileers. A war that could have truly assured destruction of millions of lives never was fought. What a huge victory. Today the fight continues. The requirements are even more challenging. The reality of missile attacks from evil people keep us ever vigilant. So, how do we honor those who've gone before? How do we say thanks for the countless sacrifices of missile crews, the maintainers, the support warriors, and their families who've kept the watch for 50 years? Renewed commitment to not blink is one way. To pick up the banner every day and carry it without a single mistake will honor those who fought the good fight. Not many jobs demand not a single mistake, but that is the requirement. This is probably among the most thankless warrior jobs in the nation. Most people who watch TV and debate health care don't know about the 24/7, 365-day commitment and sacrifices made here and in the other missile wings. But without a doubt, it is among the most critical fights that will ever be fought. And so today, we give thanks to Almighty God for His care over 5 decades of missileers. May He continue to guide us in another good fight. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join me in a moment of silence for those who have sacrificed and dedicated their lives in the pursuit of our nation's strategic deterrence.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We've enjoyed a historic and dynamic 3 days together, from the fields of friendly strife during field day to the rekindling of old friendships at curtain raiser. We've learned of our storied past from those who were there. We've saluted those who carry the torch today and explored the possibilities for becoming the land-based strategic deterrent of tomorrow. Last evening, we were honored to host our Secretary, the Honorable Michael Donnelly, and hear firsthand how much the nation's senior leaders appreciate those who serve our ICBM community and how much they rely on our combat capability. This morning, we bowed our heads to remember our friends who have gone before us and offered thanks for the peace they brought to our nation and for the eternal peace they now enjoy. Now we come to welcome our final session, for which we are honored to again welcome Secretary Donnelly as we dedicate the original 50th anniversary artwork and present it to him for permanent display in the office of the Secretary of the Air Force.
Today we close the commemoration. The last official act will be the unveiling and presentation of the original 50th anniversary commemoration art piece to the Secretary of the Air Force, to the United States Air Force, on behalf of the ICBM force. Captain Warren Neary, young artist, it's not his primary AFSC, but on our staff, has put together a marvelous piece of art that captures many of the stories of the ICBM force. Some of you saw the presentation to the Secretary last night, the number 1 of 500 signed, numbered lithographs. Maybe not signed, we'll have to get one to do that, but they are signed, good. Not to shill, but they are available for sale. And, but Warren has really captured the essence of so many of our stories, and it's a great privilege for us to present this piece of original art to the United States Air Force to take back to Washington, where inside the Beltway, many who might not have the time or the energy can walk down the hallway of the Pentagon at some point in time in the future and say, I wonder what that was. And hopefully they will recognize that's something very important. So, Mr. Secretary, General Kehler, Warren, if we could unveil associated with that. Proclamation. The United States Air Force Art Program gratefully accepts the painting, America's Strategic Backstop, 50 Years Strong, into the Air Force's official art collection and designates it for permanent display in the office of the Secretary of the Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of the Air Force,
Well, thank you. Just a few words this morning to once again thank General Kehler and General Burg for putting together this 50th anniversary event. It's been a huge, huge success for our Air Force, especially for our missileers and men and women of 20th Air Force. General Lord, again, thanks to you and so many other senior leaders, mentors to this community who've taken the time to come out to Warren this week, Chaplain Baldwin, Tim McMahon, so many retired flags and leaders in this community over so many decades. We do appreciate the time that you've taken to make this a very, very special event. I will tell you that in the halls of the Pentagon, the Air Force art collection is known as perhaps the best in the Pentagon. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is a worthy addition to what is already a wonderful collection, and it will have a place of honor in our Air Force headquarters. Captain Neary, thank you for really a beautiful and brilliant piece of art that captures the soul, the history, the dedication, the complexity, just every aspect of this vital mission of nuclear deterrence. You've done it brilliantly, and we thank you for this great contribution to our Air Force.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Kehler. I told you. Well, before I bring this to close, let me offer some thank yous. First of all, Mr. Secretary, sir, thanks for being here. It makes a huge difference, and I know that the entire force is very appreciative of the fact that you took time from an extraordinarily busy schedule to come and spend some time with us. General Chilton left last evening, but I would pass an absentee thank you to him. And then let me also offer a special thanks to our industry partners. Thanks for the displays. Thanks for being on the cutting edge with us for 50 years. Thanks for leading us for 50 years and giving us the kind of weapon systems that we have been so proud of. And in particular, this extraordinary weapon system called Minuteman. It is amazing to me to think that a system that was engineered actually beginning in the late 40s, early 50s, as you heard yesterday, that was designed and built and deployed in the early 1960s, is still the world's leading edge strategic deterrent force today. What vision those people had, what foresight those people had, and what an extraordinary team of industry partners that we have today who keep that system going the way we need it kept going. Thank you. Well done. Out. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the ICBM Symposium and the 50th anniversary commemoration. Please remain standing for the departure of the official party and the playing of the Air Force song.